First contact fallout. The massive cruiser Dominant Claw glided through the void, its sleek obsidian hull absorbing the distant starlight rather than reflecting it. Inside the officers' mess hall, Commander Vexnera clicked his primary mandibles in obvious annoyance as the conversation around him returned yet again to the Galactic Coalition's newest members. Humans, spat Sub-Commander Thraz, her emerald scales shimmering with irritation. 2 solar cycles since they were admitted, and still the Council speaks of nothing else, as if adding another soft-skinned species is somehow remarkable. It is remarkable, countered Science Officer Klivik, his crystalline form refracting the light into subtle patterns across the table, not because they deserve membership, but because of how thoroughly the Council ignored their obvious shortcomings. Commander Vexnera remained silent, his 4 obsidian eyes focused on the tactical readouts displayed on his personal terminal. The talk of humans had dominated every officer gathering for months, and he was growing weary of it. As commander of the Coalition's 8th Boundary Fleet, he had more important concerns than the politics behind accepting a new species. "Commander," prompted Medical Officer Jira, her tentacles coiling anxiously around her breathing apparatus. "Surely you have an opinion. You fought in the Hive War. You've seen more combat than any officer in this sector." Vexnera slowly raised his gaze from the terminal. His right upper mandible was missing, replaced by a metallic prosthetic that gleamed under the artificial lights. The mark of veteran status that commanded immediate respect throughout Coalition space. "My opinion," he said, his voice a low rumble that immediately silenced the room, "is that we have patrol duties to attend to. The outer rim doesn't secure itself." Before anyone could respond, the ship's alert system activated with a series of sharp tones. "Commander to the bridge," announced the ship's AI in its emotionless voice. "Priority signal detected." The officers dispersed immediately, returning to their stations with practiced efficiency. Vexnera moved with deliberate grace, his powerful exoskeleton making barely a sound as he navigated the corridors of the cruiser. By the time he reached the bridge, the primary view screen displayed a tactical readout of their immediate sector. "Report," he ordered, settling into his command chair. "Distress signal, Commander," answered the communications officer, her pincers working rapidly over the control interface. "From the human science vessel Curiosity. They report critical systems failure and request immediate assistance." A low murmur passed through the bridge crew. Vexnera noticed several officers exchanging knowing glances. "Their location?" he asked, ignoring the undercurrent of amusement. "The Krell Nebula, sir. Approximately 2 light jumps from our position." Vexnera considered the information. The Krell Nebula was notorious for its radiation storms and unpredictable gravitational fluctuations. No Coalition ship would venture there without extensive preparation and specialized shielding. "Typical," muttered Tactical Officer Draz. 2 cycles in the Coalition, and they're already blundering into danger zones. Shall I prepare a standard acknowledgement and forward the signal to Central Command? The standard procedure for a non-emergency distress call from a research vessel would indeed be to log it and allow Central Command to coordinate an appropriate response. There was no regulatory requirement for the Dominant Claw to divert from its patrol route. "No," Vexnera said finally. "Set course for the Krell Nebula. Maximum speed. Inform Central Command of our response." The bridge fell silent for a moment before the navigation officer began inputting the new coordinates. "Sir," ventured Sub-Commander Thraz hesitantly, "may I ask why we're responding personally? The humans have their own rescue protocols, and we're scheduled to rendezvous with the Sovereign Light at the Grenza outpost within." "Because," Sub-Commander interrupted Vexnera, his prosthetic mandible clicking against its organic counterpart, "I'm curious. The Coalition has accepted these humans as equals. I want to see firsthand if they deserve that status." The truth was more complex. Throughout his distinguished career, Vexnera had heard the rumors about humans, their supposed resilience, their claimed adaptability, their alleged ingenuity when faced with impossible situations. Like most coalition veterans, he dismissed these tales as exaggerations at best, propaganda at worst. But a small part of him, the part shaped by centuries of combat experience, wondered. As the dominant claw accelerated to light jump velocity, Vexnera accessed his terminal and pulled up the available data on human physiology. The more he read, the more his skepticism grew. Single-function respiratory system, no redundant organs, minimal natural armor, limited sensory capabilities, fragile skeletal structure. How had such obviously inferior beings survived long enough to develop interstellar travel? The scientific consensus suggested blind evolutionary luck, combined with an unusually stable home planet. The political analysis suggested their acceptance into the coalition was merely a strategic move to incorporate their resource-rich solar system. Whatever the reason, Vexnera would soon have the opportunity to observe these humans in a crisis situation. If nothing else, it would provide definitive evidence to settle the endless debates among his officers. "Commander," called out the sensor operator, interrupting his thoughts. "We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the nebula. Patterns don't match known natural phenomena." Vexnera's attention sharpened. "Weapons fire. Inconclusive, sir. The nebula's interference is making detailed scans impossible. Time to intercept. 47 minutes to nebula perimeter, Commander. Another 30 to reach the distress signal's origin." Vexnera rose from his command chair, his imposing height causing several junior officers to straighten instinctively. "All stations, battle readiness protocol. This is no longer a simple rescue mission." He turned to his second-in-command. "Thraz, prepare a boarding team. Full combat gear." As the bridge erupted into activity, Vexnera returned to studying the limited information on human capabilities. One detail caught his attention, a notation about human stress responses that seemed almost too absurd to be factual. The file claimed that under extreme duress, humans could temporarily exceed their normal physical limitations, accessing reserves of strength and endurance that defied their baseline physiology. Coalition xenobiologists had dismissed this as human mythology rather than scientific fact, but the notation remained in the official documentation. "Adrenaline response," Vexnera murmured, memorizing the term. Perhaps there was more to these soft-skinned creatures than was immediately obvious. Or perhaps, as he and most of the coalition believed, they were simply another fragile species that would eventually fade into obscurity, remembered only as a minor footnote in the grand history of galactic civilization. Either way, he would soon find out. Trial by fire. The dominant claw dropped out of light jump at the edge of the Krell Nebula, its massive engines powering down to standard propulsion. The viewscreen filled with swirling clouds of purple and green gases, shot through with veins of radiation that glowed an ominous blue. "Radiation levels?" Vexnera inquired. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the chaotic patterns. "Within acceptable parameters for our shielding, Commander," reported Science Officer Klivik. "But rising steadily. We have approximately 4 hours before we'll need to withdraw or risk cellular degradation." Location of the human vessel. The tactical display zoomed in on a sector deep within the nebula's heart. "Here, sir. The Curiosity appears to be adrift. Minimal power signatures detected." Vexnera considered the information. "Life signs. Inconclusive," admitted Klivik, his crystalline structure dimming slightly in frustration. "The nebula's interference is blocking detailed scans. We'll need to approach within visual range for accurate assessment." "Proceed," ordered Vexnera. "Tactical. Maintain defensive posture. Communications. Continue hailing the human vessel." As the dominant claw penetrated deeper into the nebula, tension on the bridge increased. The strange energy signatures detected earlier had disappeared, but Vexnera's combat instincts were alert. Something about this situation felt wrong. 90 minutes later, the human ship came into visual range. The Curiosity was significantly smaller than the Coalition cruiser, sleek and cylindrical with extended sensor arrays that had clearly been damaged. It rotated slowly on its axis, emergency lights blinking irregularly across its hull. "No response to hails, Commander," reported the communications officer. "But internal systems appear to be functioning. Life support is active. Scan for escape pods. All pods present, sir. None have been launched." Vexnera clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. So they didn't abandon ship. Curious. Perhaps their crisis was exaggerated, suggested Sub-Commander Thraz. Or perhaps they simply lacked the competence to operate their own emergency systems. Several officers chittered in amusement, but Vexnera silenced them with a gesture. "Prepare the boarding team. I will lead personally." This announcement caused immediate concern. "Sir," protested Thraz, "protocol dictates." "Unaware of protocol, Sub-Commander," interrupted Vexnera. "But as I said, I'm curious. Maintain position and be prepared to extract us at my signal." 30 minutes later, Vexnera led a team of 8 elite coalition soldiers through the airlock connecting the two vessels. Each wore the advanced battle armor of the Boundary Fleet, equipped with weapons capable of neutralizing any known threat. Vexnera himself carried an ancient resonance blade at his side, a traditional weapon from his homeworld, reserved for warriors of exceptional skill. The interior of the Curiosity was eerily silent. Emergency lighting cast long shadows through corridors designed for beings significantly smaller than the average coalition species. "Atmosphere composition normal for human requirements," reported one soldier, checking his scanner. "Temperature elevated by approximately 12 degrees above their standard." "Life signs?" asked Vexnera. "Multiple readings, but scattered and faint. Possible interference." The team moved methodically through the ship, documenting signs of struggle. Scorch marks on bulkheads suggested weapons fire. Equipment had been destroyed, and small droplets of red fluid, human blood, Vexnera recognized, were visible on various surfaces. "Combat situation," Vexnera concluded. "But against whom? And where are the bodies?" They reached the ship's bridge to find it abandoned. The command terminal showed signs of hasty evacuation, half-consumed food, personal items left behind, a chair overturned. One terminal continued to function, displaying a ship's log that had been interrupted mid-entry. As Vexnera moved to examine it, the ship's lighting suddenly failed completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by their armor's illumination systems. "Power failure," began one soldier, but Vexnera cut him off with a sharp gesture. "No, ambush." The words had barely left his mouth when the attack came. Focused energy beams lanced through the darkness, striking 2 coalition soldiers before they could react. Their armor absorbed the initial impact, but the unexpected attack threw the team into momentary confusion. "Defensive formation," ordered Vexnera, drawing his resonance blade. The ancient weapon hummed to life, its edge vibrating at a frequency designed to slice through even the most advanced armor. Shadowy figures swarmed into the bridge, bipedal, but definitely not human. Their movements were too fluid, too precise. They wore adaptive camouflage that blended with the darkness, making them difficult targets even for the Coalition's enhanced visual systems. "Pirates," hissed Thraz, firing her particle weapon at a shape that darted along the ceiling. "Vreklak raiders." The Vreklak were notorious throughout this sector, ruthlessly efficient scavengers who preyed on isolated vessels. Their exoskeletons contained natural stealth properties that made them ideal ambush predators, and their neurotoxin-coated claws could penetrate all but the most advanced armors. The battle was chaotic and brutal. Coalition training emphasized ordered combat in open spaces, not close quarters fighting against enemies specifically evolved for ambush tactics. Despite their superior weaponry, Vexnera's team found themselves at a disadvantage. A Vreklak raider dropped from an overhead conduit directly onto Vexnera's back, its claws seeking the vulnerable joint between his helmet and torso armor. Years of combat experience saved him. He pivoted instantly, driving his resonance blade upward into his attacker. The creature died with a high-pitched shriek that heard even through the helmet's audio filters. But another raider had already moved to take its place. A neurotoxin-coated claw found the gap in Vexnera's armor, puncturing deep into his shoulder. Searing pain shot through his body as the toxin entered his bloodstream. His right arm went numb almost instantly. "Commander is hit," shouted one of his soldiers, trying to fight through to his position. Vexnera knew the situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Fall back to the ship," he ordered, switching his blade to his left hand. Immediate withdrawal. His team began a fighting retreat toward the airlock, but the pirates had positioned themselves to cut off that escape route. More Vreklak were emerging from ventilation shafts and maintenance crawl spaces. A massive explosion rocked the human vessel, throwing everyone off balance. The pirates used this moment to press their attack, separating Vexnera from his team. "Commander," Thraz's voice came through his helmet comm, distorted by interference. "We cannot reach your position. The hull has been breached between us." Vexnera assessed his situation with cold precision. The neurotoxin was spreading through his system, compromising his motor control. 3 Vreklak raiders were converging on his position. The path to the airlock was blocked by debris from the explosion. "Return to the ship," he ordered calmly. "That's a direct command." "Sir, we cannot." "You can, and you will, Sub-Commander. The dominant claw must be warned. I will find an alternative extraction route." There was a moment of silence before Thraz responded, her voice tight with emotion that would be considered inappropriate in coalition military culture. "Understood, Commander. May victory find you." Vexnera cut the communication and prepared for what he assumed would be his final battle. The coalition did not celebrate suicide missions, but neither did they shrink from necessary sacrifices. If his death would allow his crew to escape and warn the coalition about the Vreklak presence, it would be a worthy end. The 3 raiders attacked simultaneously, their movements perfectly coordinated. Despite his injury, Vexnera managed to dispatch one with a sweeping blow from his resonance blade. The second scored another hit with its toxin claws, this time along his left leg. The third pinned his weapon arm against a bulkhead, its fanged mouth opening to deliver a killing bite. Then the raider's head exploded in a spray of viscous fluid. The remaining attacker whirled toward this new threat, but a second shot caught it directly in the center of its compound eyes. It collapsed, twitching, beside its companion. Vexnera struggled to focus his vision, the neurotoxin now seriously affecting his nervous system. A figure approached cautiously from the shadows, smaller than a Vreklak, moving with a different gait. "Are you hit bad?" asked a voice in accented but understandable coalition standard. Human, female, based on the vocal patterns. Vexnera tried to raise his weapon, but found his arm would not respond to his commands. "Neurotoxin," he managed to say, his translator struggling to maintain coherence as his speech centers began to fail. "Fatal to my species in approximately 20 minutes without treatment." The human moved closer, and he could now make out her features, small by coalition standards, with dark hair tied back from her face. She wore what appeared to be a standard science vessel uniform, modified with additional pockets containing tools and weapons. The projectile weapon in her hands was of makeshift design, clearly assembled from available components rather than standard issue. "I'm Engineer Maya Chen," she said, scanning the corridor for more threats. "And you're about to find out if human medical technology is compatible with whatever species you are. Can you move?" Vexnera attempted to stand but collapsed as his leg gave way entirely. The human, Maya, muttered something in her native language that his translator couldn't process, then made a decision. "Medical bay is 2 decks down. Pirates have the elevators locked down, but I know a maintenance route." She slung her weapon across her back and moved to his side. "This is going to hurt both of us, but we don't have much choice." Before Vexnera could respond, Maya positioned herself under his arm and attempted to lift him. Despite her obvious effort, she couldn't support his weight. "Coalition," Vexnera began, the words becoming difficult as the toxin progressed. "Coalition physiology. 3 times human density. Maya's expression showed frustration rather than defeat. Plan B, then. She disappeared briefly, returning with what looked like part of a bulkhead mounted on small anti-gravity units, an improvised stretcher. Maintenance crew used these to move heavy equipment, she explained, helping roll his increasingly unresponsive body onto the platform. Should hold your weight if the power cells last. As darkness began to encroach on the edges of Vexnera's vision, his last conscious thought was surprised acknowledgement that this fragile human had not abandoned him, despite having no obvious obligation or advantage in saving a coalition officer she didn't know. Perhaps, he considered as consciousness slipped away, there was something to human mythology after all. Survival Odyssey. Consciousness returned to Vexnera in waves, each bringing with it a different sensation. Pain came first, a deep, throbbing ache that radiated from his shoulder and leg. Then awareness of his surroundings, the hum of machinery, the sterile smell of medical equipment, the coolness of a metal surface beneath him. Finally, memory returned. The ambush, the Vreklak raiders, the neurotoxin, the human. He opened his 4 eyes cautiously, allowing his compound vision to adjust to the light. He was in what appeared to be the human vessel's medical bay, lying on an examination table that was clearly not designed for his species' anatomy. His armor had been partially removed to allow access to his wounds, and medical devices of unfamiliar design were attached to his exposed exoskeleton. You're awake. Good. The human, Maya, entered his field of vision. She looked different than before, exhaustion evident in her posture, a bandage wrapped around her left forearm, dried blood on her uniform. The toxin? Vexnera asked, his voice rasping through his translator. Neutralized, mostly. Maya checked the readouts on a nearby monitor. Your physiology is completely different from ours, so I couldn't use standard antivenin protocols. Had to improvise a dialysis system to filter your bloodstream directly. She gestured to a complex arrangement of medical equipment that had been clearly modified from its original purpose. Vexnera recognized the ingenuity involved. The human had essentially created a cross-species medical treatment with limited resources under emergency conditions. You have medical training? He asked. Maya gave a short laugh that contained no humor. Engineering background. But everyone on exploratory vessels gets basic emergency medical certification. The rest was creative problem-solving. Vexnera attempted to sit up, only to discover that while the toxin might have been neutralized, its effects on his motor control remained significant. His right arm and left leg were almost completely unresponsive. Neural damage, Maya explained, seeing his struggle. The toxin attacks myelin sheaths, or whatever the equivalent is in your nervous system. Recovery time unknown. The ship's status. My crew. Your ship withdrew after the explosion. Probably assumed the worst. The blast severed all communications and created a radiation surge that would have masked life signs. She helped position him into a sitting posture. As for the Curiosity, we're running on emergency power. Main systems are offline. Pirates control most of the ship, but they haven't found us yet. We're in an isolated medical bay in the research section. Vexnera processed this information with military efficiency. The pirates attacked your vessel for what purpose? Maya's expression hardened. We were studying the nebula's unique radiation properties. Found something unexpected. Radiation patterns that suggested artificial origin rather than natural formation. Before we could investigate further, the Vreklak attacked. They seemed particularly interested in our research data. The rest of your crew. Most were taken captive. The Vreklak value live specimens, particularly ones they haven't encountered before. Her voice remained steady, but Vexnera detected subtle stress indicators in her body language. I was in the maintenance shaft when they hit. Been playing hide and seek with them ever since. Vexnera studied the human more carefully. According to everything he knew about human physiology, she should be showing signs of extreme distress. yet her behavior indicated focus, determination, and tactical awareness. "You've survived alone against Vreklak raiders for how long?" "3 days, ship time," Maya answered, checking a device on her wrist. "Not alone for all of it. Started with 5 of us hidden throughout the ship, down to just me now." The implication was clear. The other survivors had been captured or killed, yet this human continued to function effectively. "Why save me?" Vexnera asked directly. "Tactical disadvantage. Increased risk. No clear benefit." Maya looked surprised by the question. "You needed help. Isn't that enough?" Before Vexnera could respond, an alarm sounded from a makeshift detection system positioned near the medical bay's entrance. "They found us," Maya said, immediately moving to gather essential supplies. "Can you move at all?" Vexnera forced his body to respond, managing to stand with support from the examination table. His right arm hung useless at his side, and his left leg could bear only minimal weight. Insufficient for combat effectiveness, he admitted, a concept shameful to acknowledge in coalition military culture. Maya handed him a weapon, his own sidearm, salvaged from his armor. "Then we avoid combat. I've mapped most of the maintenance access ways. If we can reach the auxiliary control room on Deck C, I might be able to send a targeted distress signal through the nebula's interference. The pirates will detect it," Vexnera pointed out. "Yes," she agreed, slinging a bag of supplies across her chest. "But so will any coalition ships still searching the area. It's our best option." The journey through the ship's maintenance tunnels was arduous. The passages were designed for routine repair access, not as transportation routes. For the human, they were merely cramped. For Vexnera, with his larger frame and compromised mobility, they were nearly impassable. Several times they were forced to stop while Maya scouted ahead, returning to help him navigate particularly challenging sections. Despite the clear physical strain, she never suggested leaving him behind, a decision that continued to puzzle Vexnera. In coalition military doctrine, compromised units were typically abandoned if they threatened mission success. Temperatures rising, Maya noted as they paused in a junction between tunnels. Pirates must have disabled the environmental control systems in this section. Vexnera's environmental sensors confirmed her assessment. Current temperature exceeding human comfort threshold. Approaching human medical danger level within 2 hours. Maya wiped sweat from her face, her breathing already labored. "Wouldn't be the first time. During training, we did survival exercises in the Atacama Desert. This is practically pleasant in comparison." She helped him navigate around a collapsed section of tunnel, her much smaller frame straining under even partial support of his weight. Vexnera noticed that she favored her right side, an injury she hadn't mentioned. "Your damage," he stated. "Left torso region." Maya grimaced. "Cracked ribs from an encounter yesterday. Nothing critical." "Painful," Vexnera countered. "Potentially serious without treatment." "There's a difference between hurt and harmed," she replied cryptically. "This is just hurt. We keep moving." As they progressed deeper into the ship's infrastructure, Vexnera observed the human with increasing attention. Coalition intelligence assessments classify humans as physically inferior, but potentially dangerous due to their unpredictability. What he was witnessing suggested a different conclusion. Maya demonstrated remarkable environmental adaptability, functioning effectively despite rising temperature, limited resources, and physical injury. Her problem-solving capabilities had already saved his life once. Most surprisingly, she exhibited psychological resilience that defied explanation given her species' supposed fragility. Their journey was interrupted when they encountered a sealed bulkhead, part of the ship's automatic containment system. "Radiation leak on the other side," Maya explained, examining the warning displays. "We'll need to find an alternate route." Time factor becoming critical, Vexnera reminded her. His tactical assessment suggested the pirates would eventually conduct a systematic sweep of all maintenance areas. Maya studied the ship schematics she had downloaded to a portable device. "There's another route, but," she hesitated, It crosses through a section exposed to vacuum after the hull breach. Emergency force fields are containing it, but they're unstable. Your environmental protection. I have a vacuum suit in my pack. It's damaged but should hold for a short exposure. She didn't mention the obvious problem. There was no suit that would fit Vexnera's substantially larger form. Proceed alone, Vexnera decided. Complete the mission objective. Tactical necessity. Maya shook her head firmly. That's not how we operate. Explain. Humans don't leave people behind. Not when there's any chance of success. Vexnera clicked his mandibles in frustration. Irrational parameter. Reduces mission success probability. Maybe. Maya was already examining the sealed bulkhead more carefully. Or maybe it creates possibilities we haven't considered yet. Help me with this access panel. Working together, they removed the panel covering the bulkhead's emergency override system. Maya studied the unfamiliar coalition technology with intense focus. Your medical technology was incompatible with my physiology, Vexnera pointed out. This system will be similarly problematic. Engineering principles are universal, Maya replied, already modifying components. The radiation containment uses force field technology similar to your ship's atmospheric barriers. Different application, same basic principles. Vexnera watched as she reconfigured the system, bypassing safety protocols and rerouting power from emergency systems. It was precisely the kind of adaptability that coalition military doctrine both respected and feared. The ability to understand and manipulate unfamiliar technology under pressure. There, Maya said finally, connecting a final circuit. This should create a temporary radiation-free corridor. The force fields will contain the radiation while allowing us physical passage. Should, repeated Vexnera skeptically. Maya smiled thinly. Welcome to human science, Commander. Should is as good as it gets sometimes. She activated the modified system. The bulkhead slid open to reveal a shimmering tunnel of interconnected force fields, each containing the deadly radiation while creating a narrow but navigable path. Impressive, admitted Vexnera. Don't compliment me yet, Maya cautioned. Those fields are drawing power from critical systems. We have maybe 5 minutes before they fail completely. They moved as quickly as possible through the corridor of force fields, Vexnera's injured leg making each step precarious. Halfway through, warning alarms began to sound throughout the section. Power fluctuation, Maya explained, helping to steady him. Field integrity dropping. Vexnera could see the force fields beginning to waver, allowing deadly radiation to seep through in visible waves. His armor would provide minimal protection, but the human had no such advantage. Your radiation tolerance, he asked. Lower than yours, significantly. Maya increased their pace despite the obvious pain this caused both of them. Let's not test exact limits. They had nearly reached the exit when the nearest force field collapsed entirely, releasing a surge of radiation directly toward them. Without hesitation, Maya positioned herself between Vexnera and the radiation wave, using her body as a shield. The exposure lasted only seconds before they passed through the exit bulkhead, which sealed automatically behind them. Maya collapsed against the corridor wall, her breathing labored and skin noticeably reddened on exposed areas. Radiation damage assessment, Vexnera asked urgently. Maya checked a medical scanner from her pack. Acute exposure, not immediately fatal. She administered an injection to herself from an emergency medical kit. Anti-radiation meds will manage it for now. Vexnera struggled to understand her action. You positioned yourself to absorb radiation intended for me. Explanation required. Your injuries already compromised your system. Additional radiation exposure might have killed you. She stated this as simple fact rather than heroism. My species has surprising radiation tolerance for short-term exposure. Another evolutionary quirk. As they continued toward the auxiliary control room, Vexnera found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about humans. The Coalition classified them as a minor species, noteworthy only for their diplomatic persistence rather than any inherent capabilities. Yet this single human had demonstrated medical ingenuity, technological adaptability, physical endurance beyond her species' baseline parameters, and a form of psychological resilience that had no equivalent in Coalition military training. Most perplexing was her apparent willingness to risk her survival for his, a being she had never met before, from a species that had shown little respect for humans since their admission to the Coalition. When they finally reached the auxiliary control room, Maya immediately began working to establish a communications link. Despite her deteriorating physical condition, the radiation exposure clearly taking its toll, her technical skills remained sharp. "The nebula's interference is stronger than expected," she reported, adjusting the communication array. "I'll need to modify the signal parameters to compensate." As she worked, Vexnera noticed her hands trembling, a symptom of radiation sickness progressing more rapidly than she had admitted. "Your medical condition is worsening," he observed. "Yes," she acknowledged without looking up from her work. "That happens when you stand in front of a radiation wave. The important thing is to get this signal out before the pirates realize what we're doing." Vexnera watched as she reconfigured the communication system, bypassing safety protocols and pushing the equipment beyond its design specifications. It was reckless, innovative, and exactly what the situation required. "Signal ready," Maya announced. "Broadcasting now." The moment the transmission began, alarms activated throughout the ship. The pirates would know exactly where they were. "How long until potential Coalition response?" Vexnera asked, assessing their tactical situation. "If any ships are still searching the nebula." "Maybe 30 minutes. Maya was already gathering equipment. "If they've withdrawn completely." "Could be hours or days." "The pirates will reach this position in approximately 12 minutes, Vexnera calculated. "Defensive options limited." Maya's expression showed determination rather than fear. "Then we'll need to be somewhere else when they arrive. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." As she outlined her plan, Vexnera was forced to acknowledge that Coalition tactical doctrine had severely underestimated human potential. This fragile-seeming species had capabilities that defied conventional assessment, not because of superior physical attributes, but because of something far more dangerous. They simply refused to accept defeat as inevitable. Respect earned. The corridors of the Curiosity echoed with the sounds of the Vreklak pirates, searching for them. Maya's plan had led them to the ship's primary research laboratory, a large chamber filled with specialized equipment for studying the nebula's unique properties. "The distress signal is a decoy,"